Hey guys, it's Jess, and thanks for tuning in today. I'm excited to share a new card with you featuring two unlikely paired stamps from Trinity. I am going to be doing some creative stamping and masking to create a fun birthday card. Since Trinity is celebrating its second birthday this month, I figured this was a perfect time to create a fun and exciting birthday card. I'm always looking for different things to have in my stash for any sort of occasion that pops up, and having birthday cards on hand is really important to me because when I realize I need one, I'm a little bit of a procrastinator and I don't always have time to make one right away. So if I have one in my stash already, then that works out perfectly for me. So to make this card today, I am using the Autumn Forest Friends stamp set. I took the wagon image from that stamp set, and then I'm also using this adorable, like super gorgeous floral image called Love You Bunches. This is a really large floral stamp set, and I am just using a portion of it. Basically what I'm doing here is I've cut a mask out of post-it note or sticky note tape, and I'm using that to cover up the wagon image, and then I'm stamping over top of that with my floral image here. Now you can see that I didn't get a perfect stamp because I honestly was not being very careful. I ended up wiping off with my cloth a little more than I needed to, so I ended up having to redraw things back in because I don't like to have to start over. So I like to try to fix things if I can, and some of them were just a little bit faint. It wasn't that I didn't get a stamped impression, it's just that the stamped impression I did get was a little bit light, so I just grabbed a pen or a fine liner and I'm going back over those images just to have that ready to go so I can actually start coloring. Now, it is important to remember that if you're going to be doing any drawing or tracing with a pen, you do want to make sure that it's safe to use with the coloring medium that you choose. If you're going to be using a water-based medium, make sure that you use something that's waterproof. And if you're going to be using an alcohol-based marker like I am today, do make sure that your pen or whatever you're using is safe to use with that medium. That way you're not disappointed if you spend all of this time tracing over the lines and redrawing everything, and then it smears when you start to color. That's super disappointing. All right, so basically what I've done here is masked off the bottom, I masked off the wagon, and then I did my stamping. Like I mentioned before, I did go ahead and trace over all of those images with my fine liner, or black pen basically is what it is. And then once I was done with that, I did move on to start coloring my images. I knew that I wanted to keep this really simple as far as color choices go, so I only used one color for all of the flowers and one color combination, I should say, for all of the flowers, and one color combination for all of the leaf or foliage parts of the image. And this kind of gave me a more selective color palette so that I didn't have to worry about too many competing colors or themes within my project here. I knew that I wanted my background to match this as well, so I was careful not to choose too many colors, and I kept them around the same sort of color families that I was going to be doing for my ink blending once I made my background. I am going to be doing a bit of coloring here, so I'm going to pop on a little bit of music for you until that is done, and then once I'm finished, we're going to go ahead and do our ink blending and finish up the card. All right, our coloring is done and we have started on our ink blending. As you can see, I started with the Cracked Pistachio Distress Oxide. I do really like to use the Distress Oxide inks because they blend so smoothly and you can go back over a darker color with a lighter color and still affect change in that ink blending that you've done, which I think is really, really cool. You can't get the same results with a Distress ink once you've gone too dark. Unfortunately, you don't seem to be able to go back since those inks are transparent, but since the Oxides are a pigment ink, well, sort of a hybrid of a pigment and a dye ink, you do have a little bit more wiggle room when it comes to blending those colors. So I chose 4 blues or blue greens here that I could use with my background. I used Cracked Pistachio, Peacock Feathers, Mermaid, Lagoon, and Chipped Sapphire. The way that I like to do my ink blending is to start with the lightest color and then work towards the darkest color while overlayering or overlapping those colors together. I know a lot of people will kind of just start one color and then end and start another color and kind of just blend them in the middle there. But when I work with Distress Oxides, I do like to blend the entire area with the lightest color first and then go over top of it with the next darker color, just leaving a little bit down at the bottom. And I feel like I get really, really smooth results this way. I really like the way that this works. All right, so I decided I wanted a little interest in the background, so I decided to use the splatter technique using the Distress sprayer. I spritzed that directly into my hand and then flicked those water droplets onto my background. Because this ink formula reacts with water, it sort of pushes or oxidizes the ink away, and then it leaves that kind of lighter or white sort of look where the ink has been lifted or moved. I decided to go ahead and let that dry. You can use a heat tool to dry that if you would like to, but if you'd rather, you can always let it air dry as well. You do want to be sure that your panel is completely dry before you go ahead and heat emboss it as this next step, because if you have any wet ink still on there, all of your embossing powder is going to stick to the ink and you'll have a big sticky mess on your hands, which is never fun. So do make sure that your panel is completely dry, and I definitely recommend treating it very generously with a anti-static powder tool. Once I applied that powder, I did go ahead and stamp that using my mini MISTI so I could make sure that my positioning was perfect. I poured on my white embossing powder and then tapped off the excess, and then I melted that powder with my heat tool. I actually did go back and add a second layer of embossing powder because my first layer was a little bit thin. There were a couple spots where I could see through it a little bit, so I just put my panel right back into my mini MISTI, stamped in the exact same spot again with that same embossing ink, and then poured the powder on, tapped off the excess, melted it again. And that just gave me a thicker, more dimensional, hello, happy birthday sentiment here. And I really, really like the way that that turned out. I lately have been really loving using a smaller panel on my card front, so I actually cut this one down to 3.75 by 5 instead of my normal 4 by 5.25. So it's a little bit smaller, just by 1/4 of an inch, but I like having that larger white border around the outside. Once I was done trimming that down, I did go ahead and attach that to a white A2 size card base. This is a little out of the norm for me as well. I've been using a little bit more side folding cards lately. Normally I do a top folding card because I do like those a lot, but I've been wanting to kind of change things up and go back and forth a bit. So I attached that directly to the card panel, and that finished off the card, you guys. I really hope that you love today's project and seeing another way that you could use 2 kind of completely different stamp sets to make it work. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the Trinity channel and my channel as well so you never miss a video from me or Trinity, and I will see you guys in another video really soon.